This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Thousands protest in Mauritius over the government's handling of recent oil spill and deaths of dolphins. Suspended Libyan interior minister says he is ready for a probe into his handling of protests in Tripoli. And Japanese politicians line up to fill the position of outgoing Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. Deodar leopards thump Arusha rhinos 45-5 in a one-off rugby tournament in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Well, let's begin in Mauritius, where thousands of protesters and environmentalists have been protesting in the capital, Port Louis. They want investigations into the oil spill by a Japanese ship, as well as the mysterious death of 40 dolphins urgently concluded. The demonstrators gathered at the St. Louis Cathedral Square on Saturday. The government says it will launch autopsies on all the dolphins. So far, only 2 tests have been conducted by the state-run Albion Fisheries Research Center. Vets say the carcasses have injuries, but no traces of oil.
I came to support the movement, to give my positive energy to this movement of the people of Mauritius, who for once are united in action. Rarely do people take it to the streets in Mauritius.
I am here more for the young people, their future, their work, and also especially for the dolphins, and because the government does not want to accept the wrong which it has done. It does not want to accept that it did nothing to avoid the catastrophe. We are here for that.
Meanwhile, it is not the size of the oil spill that is cause for concern among Mauritians, but rather where it happened and how important that is. The stricken ship MV Wakishio hit a coral reef at the Pointe des Nids on the 7th of August. The oil spill has since stretched into the Blue Bay Marine Park, which is a protected wetland. Local reports say the ship's captain and crew had ignored warnings from the Coast Guard. Pointe des Nids is one of the many protected marine areas that is among the leading attractions of its kind in the world. It offers stunning views and has served as one of the landmarks of Mauritius. The country is home to over 1,700 species of marine life, which include over 800 rare fish and mammals. Conservative estimations indicate that up to 1,000 tons of oil spilled into this important Mauritian sea haven. Well, it's been more than a month since the Japanese ship MV Wakishio ran aground. However, the consequences of that tragedy are still being felt. For an update from Mauritius, we're now joined by CGTN's Liu Fei Fei. Fei, we saw demonstrations that took place in the Mauritian capital yesterday. Can you tell us more about those demonstrations?
Well, the demonstrations sounded an alarm bell as to the Wakashio oil spill and the fallout. The people are frustrated by it. The people are heartbroken by the subsequent deaths of the dolphins. And now they're becoming increasingly outraged. They were led by a local social activist, Bruno Lorette. And according to the organizers, some 120 to 150,000 protesters turned out to march peacefully in the Mauritius capital of Port Louis. It's significant because when you take into consideration that the total population is only about 1.3 million, it's about 10% of the people here turned up for this demonstration. And what they wanted is a transparent investigation as to why the oil spill took place in the first place. And now they're also wanting scientific-based evidence of what's causing these mysterious deaths of the dolphins.
Feifei, when you talk about...
And it's also important to note...
Feifei, when you talk about wanting to know more, can you give us an update on the death toll of the dolphins and subsequent autopsies conducted on them?
As of now, the official count stands at 41 dead dolphins that have been washed up onto shores very close to the site of the Wakashio shipwreck. What has happened is the government-run Albion Fisheries Research Center has performed the autopsy on 2 of the 41 dead dolphins so far that we are aware of, and they've released preliminary findings that they had no traces of oil on their skin, in their respiratory systems, in their throats, or in their stomachs. The Minister of Fisheries has also said that it's simply a sad coincidence. It's also important to note that the government has sent 2 sets of eardrums from the dolphins to the nearby French Reunion Island for further preliminary investigations.
Feifei, with the enormous impact on the areas affected by the oil spill, what are you hearing regarding plans to try and restore some of that vital marine wildlife? And also, what is being said about preventing the loss of more dolphins?
Well, the cleanup effort is an ongoing effort. The government has been organizing this through the Ministry of Fisheries, the Ministry of Environment, the Albion Fisheries Research Center, together with international experts from Japan, from the United Nations. They're all on the ground and providing ways to sample the air, to sample the delicate ecosystems. And in terms of actual cleanup, they've been picking up seaweed in the mangroves, and that's as a first step. And subsequently, they're going to flush the mangrove roots. And then when they can, they're going to try to wash out the remaining oil that's there. But this is an extremely complicated and delicate process, and if it's not done properly, it could actually cause more harm, because people walking on the wetlands can actually cause the oil to sink even deeper underground. And of course, these are nurseries for fishes and insects and so forth, and it has a direct impact to the lagoons and the ocean. So that's ongoing. And in terms of the dolphins, I think everyone is still waiting for the science-based results as to why they died. Now no one knows what is causing these mysterious deaths. So while some volunteers are out there with metal rods in their own boats trying to scare the dolphins back into the ocean, some people are saying that they need to come into the lagoon to get medical treatment. Right now, nothing specific and nothing concrete has been determined.
Thank you so much for that, Feifei. That was CGTN's Liu Feifei speaking to us from Marburg in Mauritius. Well, a Reuters video has shown the last moments of 2 dolphins, a mother and her baby. The 2 were spotted floating on an oily surface polluted after the Japanese ship MV Wakashio broke down last month. The 2 are among 40 dolphins found dead in Mauritian waters. Authorities fear the numbers may increase. A fisherman who filmed the incident says he has spotted nearly 200 dolphins inside the reef and between 25 to 30 dead ones. Let's move on to Libya now, where the country's Interior Minister, Fatih Bashaga, has landed in Tripoli. Bashaga says he's ready for an investigation after he was suspended by the head of the country's internationally recognized government. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy reports.
Bashaga's suspension coincides with reports of growing friction between him and the Prime Minister of the Tripoli-based Government of National Accord, Fayez al-Sarraj. Police forces and civilians in Misrata have been protesting his suspension.
We are surprised with the decision by the head of the Presidential Council to suspend Interior Minister Fatih Bashaga and the ordering of investigation. Lately, Bashaga emerged as the man of the difficult moment by fighting corruption.
A decree issued by Prime Minister Sarraj says Bashaga will be investigated by the GNA leadership within 72 hours. His duties have been handed out to Deputy Minister Khalid Hamad Mazen. Bashaga says he is ready for an investigation, but said it should be televised to ensure transparency.
Concerning the order by the Supreme Council, I'm ready for the investigation. I don't have anything to hide. My only fault was saying that the Libyan people are facing problems and that the government must put forward a program to help, because people bore the burden during the times of war and they continue to do so. But the government should give them some hope.
Bashaga was nominated in 2018. He played a central role during a 14-month offensive on Tripoli by Eastern-based forces that the GNA repelled in June with military support from Turkey. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN.
In South Africa, 2 police officers have been arrested and charged with murdering a 16-year-old boy in Eldorado Park, southwest of Johannesburg. The 2 were also charged with tampering with the crime scene. Since his death on Wednesday night, the community has been in uproar. Angela Coppola brings us more.
Nathaniel was a Down syndrome child, described as a gentle soul and friendly to everyone.
He's not a threat to anybody. Maybe they were busy with the illegal stuff, and they thought Nathaniel heard something, and they shot him.
Nathaniel was gunned down by 2 police officers just 100 meters from his home.
Well, I think the first response would have been shock. So he would have basically been taken by surprise. So he would have then just maybe froze in his condition, especially since he had a speech impairment. Obviously, he wasn't able to express himself as clearly as the officers would have liked him to do.
The Minister of Police has promised swift action. The 2 officers have since been arrested for murder and tampering with a crime scene.
I'm going to court to ask him, how can you shoot a Down syndrome 16-year-old? How did you get it right? Because still now I can't believe that you shoot my son.
The family's loss is immeasurable, and they are still in shock and looking for answers.
Too much. A big hole. Nathaniel was, he was a golden boy.
We can't even imagine what kind of pain I am right now. Just to think of the kind of courageous boy he is, fighting at that precious moment for his life. It's unbearable.
I appreciate you opening up, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Be strong. This is a community in crisis, and this latest death hopefully will galvanize the authorities to get the issues sorted out that are facing this community. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Eldorado Park, South Africa.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break and return more news, including Japan's politicians begin joking to fill the position of outgoing Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. And Egypt fears possibility of a second wave of coronavirus infections.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. You're watching news making headlines right here on Africa Live. Well, Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga will join the race to become the next prime minister. That's according to Japan's Kyodo news agency. Suga is seen as a close aide of outgoing Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. In 2012, Abe chose Suga for Chief Cabinet Secretary, the top government spokesman. Other contenders are former Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida and former Defense Minister Shigeru Ishiba. Abe announced on Friday that he was stepping down due to health reasons. He, however, said that he would stay on until his successor had been named. COVID-19 cases in South Korea have fallen below 300 for the first time in 5 days. It comes as authorities tighten measures in the greater Seoul area. For more, here's our correspondent Jack Barton in the capital.
Well, the government's been very reluctant to go to level 3 restrictions, which would be the highest, but which the government says would have a big impact on the economy. So what they've done is they've added a few measures or modified level 2, or what people here are calling now level 2.5 restrictions. Most of them focus on the capital, Seoul. So large franchise coffee shops are no longer allowed to have sit-in customers. That's all been fenced off, and anyone who does go in there has to leave a record so that if there is an outbreak in one of those coffee shops, it is very easy to trace back where that outbreak began and how it might have spread. Also, restaurants no longer able to have sit-in customers after 9 o'clock. Government employees, a third of them told to go and work from home. In fact, anyone who can work from home to do so, and the government encouraging private companies to adopt that policy as well, and telling everybody if you don't need to leave your house, don't at the moment. That's not an enforced restriction, but it is something most people seem to be taking on board. Then there's broader restrictions that affect the whole country. No longer will anyone be able to visit someone in a nursing home or an elderly person's home. High-risk people will essentially be isolated for the time being. All cramming schools will have to cease operations despite the fact there are high school senior exams coming up. And there are a lot of these other moves to try and limit the number of people who can come together. But again, as you mentioned, below 300, but 299, so only one below 300, there's no optimism yet.
Meanwhile, over in Germany, a mass protest against coronavirus restrictions has been broken up by police after demonstrators failed to comply with COVID safety regulations. As Noe Jabarkal reports, frustration over measures to contain the virus is growing across many parts of Europe.
Sick of COVID and fed up with lockdowns, thousands took to the streets of Berlin on Saturday to protest against coronavirus restrictions. Police say there were around 18,000 people, the highest turnout in what's becoming a weekly occurrence.
I'm taking the virus very seriously, but I've also seen the numbers and I know the situation is long past its peak. And there really isn't any serious danger anymore, especially not in the fresh air. It's better when people walk around in the fresh air without masks and breathe, instead of making themselves more ill with this ridiculous forced mask wearing.
I am here to protest for peace, freedom and love. That's all I want to express, and I want to do it peacefully.
The German capital initially banned the gatherings, but a regional court overturned the decision. But just hours after it started, Berlin police broke up the protests, saying they had no other option as demonstrators ignored social distancing and refused to wear masks. On Twitter, the force said some were intent on violence, following concerns that right-wing activists had joined the march. Speaking ahead of the rallies, officials said the movement is gathering support across Europe.
People want to come here from high-risk areas. They've been mobilized in Belgium, France, Spain and all over Germany. These are people that we can assume, as coronavirus skeptics, have taken no precautions in recent months. In a time when infection numbers are increasing, we don't believe these gatherings to be responsible.
In London, hundreds of people gathered in the centre of the city to protest lockdown measures. But in Paris, the turnout was much smaller, with only dozens showing up. Despite the resistance to public policies aiming to curb the virus, its resurgence continues. France reported almost 7,500 new cases on Friday, the most since the country went into lockdown in March. Across Europe, a pattern is emerging of people looking to fight back against the limitations to their lives. Leaders say the measures are needed to fight COVID-19, but tens of thousands disagree. Noe Jabarkal, CGTN.
Well, back here in Africa, Egypt's cabinet says it fears that the country could be on the verge of a second wave of COVID-19 infections. The statement comes as the health ministry reported 223 new coronavirus infections on Friday, up from 89 this past Sunday. The ministry has also reported 20 deaths, bringing the country's total death toll to 5,517. Yasser Hakim has that story.
Walking in the Cairo streets, you can see many Egyptians who are wearing masks and keeping their social distance. However, there are also a significant number of citizens who are not abiding by these measures, whether in the city or on the summer vacation beaches.
I admit others and myself began to take these measures lightly because the number of cases has dropped a lot compared to other countries and our population rate. That's why we're not sticking to regulations. Yes, it's wrong. As you can see, the numbers are rising again.
As you can see, I'm wearing the mask. I wear it most of the time. I don't shake hands with anyone and I keep social distance. I can't risk it. This is my life I am protecting. This issue should not be taken lightly.
Underestimating the COVID effects comes after a major drop in cases, from over 1,000 cases per day in May and July to less than 100 in mid-August.
Until recently, Egyptians have been wearing masks and strictly abiding by the measures, but now most of the people are not wearing it, whether in the street, offices or transportation. That's because they are bored after months of wearing it, and the drop in patient numbers has also encouraged them to take it off. The result is an expected second wave.
An alarming daily increase of cases this week has prompted the health minister to issue a stern warning that a second wave of the pandemic is underway. Experts believe action has to be taken immediately.
The Prime Minister has ordered police and security officials to adapt the strict punishment on people who are not following the health measures. There are hefty fines from 400 to 4,000 Egyptian pounds. Companies will also be punished if their employees are not wearing masks.
The Prime Minister has ordered isolation facilities to reopen in anticipation of a second wave of COVID-19. Meanwhile, officials have threatened that if daily cases don't drop soon, the country will face another lockdown. Yasser Hakim, CGTN, Cairo.
In South Africa, women have once again taken to the streets to raise their voices against gender-based violence. This as cases continue to rise. According to the South African Police Services, 5 women died within 24 hours in the past week alone, and that was in the hands of men they had known for a long time. CGTN's Yolisa Jamila has that report.
Gender-based violence here in South Africa just continues to escalate. In fact, it dramatically increased after government announced the national state of disaster to fight the coronavirus pandemic.
Call him out. I'm not going to be grateful for you for doing the right thing. Call him out. So we're here together.
Protest marches against gender-based violence have now become a familiar sight here in South Africa. Frustrated women and some men often take to the streets to voice their concerns and list their demands from government.
What do we want? Justice! What do you want it?
This time, the anti-gender-based violence movement staged a peaceful protest at the Union Buildings, South Africa's government seat. They say they're here to show solidarity with victims of gender-based violence, to also show their exasperation and anger with the lack of change in the situation.
These violent, dehumanizing acts carried out by men have scared our nation and have instilled fear in the hearts and lives of many of us. We do not want to hear about another life being taken by man. We do not want to hear about a brutal, violent act committed by a man. The promises of change we hear time and time again have not taken place. Today we remind you again, enough is enough.
These young protesters, mainly from universities, came with a list of demands.
We demand an immediate report from all levels of government detailing what it has genuinely done to combat gender-based violence. We demand frequent meetings with government officials and stakeholders on women and queer empowerment in the community. We demand bail to be removed as a possibility for all those charged with and those with a history of sexual offences.
Other demands include that police be given a thorough gender-based violence sensitivity training. Their list of demands was handed over to a government representative from the South African presidency. Earlier this week, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that 1.6 billion rand would be allocated to an emergency response plan that will focus on eradicating gender-based violence.
Our cries are still unheard. More women are dying. Money has been put into place to stop gender-based violence, but we're still seeing more women dying, more children dying at the hands of men.
For how long is it just going to be women standing in this fight? We are not going to be silent no more.
On Monday, ministers who form part of the security cluster will address issues relating to the capacity of the criminal justice system to combat this scourge. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Let's now head over to Tanzania, where it is all systems go as the ruling party campaigns to retain the top seat. Tanzanians will be heading to the polls on October the 28th. Analysts say the failure of the country's opposition to form a coalition could see President John Magufuli easily sail back to power for a second term, almost unopposed. Magufuli, who is the Chama cha Mapinduzi candidate, is banking on his record in tackling corruption as well as his development agenda. During announcements beginning rallies to recapture the seat, Magufuli and his supporters said that he was the best person to lead Tanzania into achieving more both economically and socially.
In a short time, I succeeded in transforming our nation from a low-income country to a middle-income one. Most people expected it to take time. It's sufficient proof that my party deserves to have another chance to lead this country to better development.
What I like about him is that he managed to control fraud and has contributed to increasing the capacity of this nation to properly collect taxes. But he also helped us transform our economy from a low-income to a middle-income economy.
After the break, updates from the world of business. Here's what's coming up. Chinese foreign minister talks trade and cooperation with French officials. And Tunisia's fruit exports dropped by 41% amid coronavirus lockdowns.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Well, time now for your business news. China and France have agreed to closer ties. The two countries signed a new agriculture agreement Saturday when Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with his French counterpart in Paris. It's the latest stop on Wang Yi's 5-country tour of Europe as Beijing works to bolster ties, rebuild the global economy, and fight the pandemic. Tony Waterman has details on his meetings with other French officials.
Trade and investment have been a major theme throughout Foreign Minister Wang Yi's European tour, and it was really no different when he met with the former French Prime Minister Laurent Fabius. The two spoke about the French-China relationship, but also about the need for multilateralism. Mr. Fabius, who is now the president of the Constitutional Council here in France, said that Paris and Beijing should set an example when it comes to global cooperation.
There are many areas where cooperation is necessary: the economy, the environment, international relations in general. My opinion is that China, France and Europe are balancing powers. There are a lot of risks. Obviously, we'll see the result of the US elections. It's important not just for the US, but the rest of the world. But in any case, we need Europe and China to cooperate in order to have a harmonious and balanced world.
Minister Wang met with French President Emmanuel Macron on Friday, where both sides said that they stand ready to promote bilateral cooperation. In the short term, the focus is on developing a coronavirus vaccine and ensuring that it is affordable and accessible to everyone, especially those people living in Africa. In May, Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged to make a Chinese-developed vaccine a global public good, something that President Macron said he appreciated. Now, Paris is the fourth stop on Wang's European tour. He's already paid visits to Italy, the Netherlands, and Norway, and he heads off to Germany on Sunday. The tour is Wang's first overseas trip since the coronavirus outbreak began, and it's really an opportunity to jumpstart conversations around trade, bilateral cooperation, and investment, which have largely been put on the back burner as world leaders focused on fighting the coronavirus pandemic. The trip is also an opportunity to ease tensions between China and Europe, which have arisen in the past 6 months. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Paris.
Well, the recent conviction of top officials involved in the mismanagement of Somalia's health funds is now being praised locally. Local and regional analysts say the recent court ruling sends a good signal to both local and international development partners that Somalia is now emerging from the ruins of long-running instability. The ruling was made by a local court last week. The officials involved included the country's deputy health minister and other senior officials in the health ministry. The key figures will serve between 3 and 18 years behind bars. They were charged with misappropriation of over $6 million between 2017 and 2020. The money was meant to go into financing anti-malaria, HIV and AIDS, and recently COVID-19 efforts. The process of investigating the matter is now being seen as one of the most efficient and transparent probes in recent times.
On April 4 this year, an investigation against 9 government officials was launched by the Banadi Regional Police. A report of the finding was soon shared with the judiciary, and the government's Auditor General requested for an audit. 9 officials serving different positions at the Ministry of Health were later arrested.
South Africa's OR Tambo International Airport is expecting close to 215 passengers to pass through its quarters in September. This comes amid the relaxation of travel restrictions in that country. Since the lockdown was eased to level 2, the airport has seen a surge of passengers and airlines requesting more flight slots at the airport. CGTN's Lisa Jamela has that report.
During the lockdown effected by government in March to curb the spread of the coronavirus, the airport had to close. At the time, the airport only handled repatriation flights.
Between April and now, we've handled no less than 50,000 passengers that were repatriated and evacuated. Of that number, 32,000 were foreign nationals that went home, and 18,000 were South Africans that came back home.
The airport would, over the past few months, gradually open as government eased the lockdown regulations. Now that the regulations have been eased further, the airport management is bracing for an increase in traffic, with more people traveling across the country.
There are 300 additional slots that have been requested by airlines, which are going to ferry no less than 60,000 additional passengers to what we had the previous month. So the signs are good that it's picking up, and that's what's next for us. Our focus is to rebuild the confidence of the passenger.
Only some 83,000 passengers made use of the airport during the month of July, but this number is expected to increase to 250,000 in September. OR Tambo International Airport has assured the public that it has put adequate safety measures to protect passengers. The airport management took the media on a walkabout to show the new protocols at the airport under level 2 that will ensure the safety of passengers.
We are continuously monitoring and ensuring that as any employer, in accordance with the regulations, each and every person that arrives at work is screened, and should there be challenges with elevated temperatures, they are not allowed to come into the workspace. All the employers within this ecosystem are also obligated to do that. To control the spread of COVID-19 as an airport, we took a conscious decision that we want to contain the movement of people into particular areas so that it makes it easy for health authorities to conduct contact tracing.
Cargo services are to remain a priority.
As part of the essential services, cargo is at the heart of that. And our cargo facilities, as well as our cargo freighters, have been at the heart of ensuring that critical personal protective equipment is able to get to the various destinations.
Regional travel will only be permitted during level 1 of the lockdown. All international passenger flights are still prohibited, except those flights authorized by the Minister of Transport. Yuli Sanjamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
In North Africa, Tunisia's fruit exports plunged 41% in volume after the coronavirus-induced lockdowns created multiple shocks to supply chains and hampered delivery to North African nations' key markets. Data published by the Interprofessional Fruit Grouping in Tunisia shows the country's fruit exports also dropped 27% in value in the last 8 months compared to the same period last year. This is after exports declined to $18.5 million from $26 million generated a year earlier. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shiwashi with more details.
Tunisia's Ministry of Agriculture announced that the North African state exported around 19,000 tons of fruits from January to the end of August 2020. This was a reduction from the 31,000 tons that were exported over the same period last year by Tunisian companies after the COVID-19 pandemic slowed trade.
Fruit exports are facing many problems since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. Exports to the neighboring main markets of Libya, the Gulf countries and Europe stopped due to interruption of air cargo.
The Director General of Agricultural Production added that closing the border crossings of Ras Jdir and Hiba between Tunisia and Libya since March negatively affected the export of fruits, as well as the transport sector.
Libya remains the first market for Tunisian fruit exporters, especially the summer fruit production. Land transport was interrupted due to health concerns. The recent launch of a direct maritime line between Sfax and Tripoli, which is dedicated to fruits and vegetables, has slightly improved the situation.
Tunisia's Interprofessional Fruit Grouping has been giving incentives to exporting companies in order to encourage fruit exports during and after the pandemic.
Air freight was a temporary solution during the crisis to export to the Gulf region, but flights were irregular. The cost also increased by 100%. Tunisian authorities supported local fruit exporters by paying 50% of the total cost.
According to the Ministry of Trade, watermelons make up 1/3 of exports, about 6,000 tons, and were mainly meant for Italy, France and Libya. In addition, 5,656 tons of peaches were exported, with 80% to the Libyan market, along with 2,000 tons of apricot, 1,000 tons of plums, and 960 tons of almonds. The Tunisian Union of Agriculture and Fisheries has announced the reopening of the Libyan market in the next few days. Hundreds of trucks will be able to cross the border into Libya and to distribute tons of fruits and vegetables in the neighboring country. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The aviation industry across the world is among the most affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. In Nigeria, the country's central bank and the Bankers Committee have agreed to extend special facilities to Nigerian registered airlines to enable the industry to address the negative impact of the pandemic. CGTN's Deji Badmus has been following that story, and he filed this report.
Nigeria's aviation industry is only just beginning to get back on its feet after over 3 months of complete shutdown because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Domestic flights resumed in July, and international flights are expected to resume early September. But as activities gradually return to the airports, industry experts say the pandemic has dealt a huge blow that will take quite a while to recover from.
Talk about it, the aircraft that flies, the onboard service, the airport that receives, and the parts aircraft, the engineers, the pilots, the entire value chain of aviation has been tremendously affected. Right now, almost all the value chain are broke, bleeding. Workers are home. Businesses are down.
Virtually every domestic airline operator in the country has had to lay off workers and slashed salaries by almost a half. The Central Bank of Nigeria is now spearheading efforts to help the industry. It has deposit money banks in the country to extend special facilities to Nigerian registered airlines to enable them overcome the impact of the pandemic and save jobs. It's a move the owner of the country's biggest private airline, has welcomed.
To me, in EPIS, what bothers us more is the retention of the workforce. Also, insurance, maintenance, they've all gone up this period. The airlines will need some support towards that. I am not asking, and I don't think anybody is asking for free money. Let it be a soft loan at an affordable interest rate.
For now, the modalities for the loan has not been spelled out, but some have been laying out what they expect to see.
It should be low-interest, long-term intervention fund. On the airline subsector, a facility of with an interest rate that is no more than 4%, and with about 1% addition for bank charges, no more than 5% when you put the interest rate and bank charges, should be made available on a long-term basis, say about 10 years, with a 2 years moratorium.
As the airlines await the special loan facility, experts are warning that even with the loan, it could still take up to 24 months before the industry makes a full recovery. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Time now for us to take a short break and return. Africa joins the world in mourning the passing of Black Panther actor Chadwick Boseman.
Join us from Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Chadwick Boseman is best known to many as the regal Black Panther in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Here in Kenya, many have expressed shock, grief, and gratitude for the man that he was. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports.
Last but not least, our king, Mr. Chadwick Boseman.
Reaction to Chadwick Boseman's death was swift and profound, with many people expressing their condolences.
Much as I'm mourning Chadwick, I'd say he's a symbol of a positive African story. Chadwick accepted a role of T'Challa on Black Panther, which changed the narrative that African stories are always negative.
I feel like we've suffered such a great loss because we were so proud. We were so proud to have this superhero come out that represents us as Black people, and you're like, oh wow, all of a sudden everybody is happy and, you know, embracing their Africanness and embracing their Blackness. And I don't think that any other actor would have been able to embrace that role apart from Chadwick Boseman, and I'm very, very sad to hear about his loss.
Some viewed him as a gentle soul and a brilliant artist who left an indelible mark in their lives.
From the interviews, you'd see that he was a really humble guy, and that is something that at least I've always learned from him.
Having been diagnosed with colon cancer like 4 years ago, it's quite unbelievable that he could do all that despite the illness that he had. And what I could pick from that is a lot of encouragement and strength, even for someone who did not know him along his whole career path.
From Jackie Robinson to the Black Panther, one of his famous movies of our time, Chadwick inspired generations. His death is simply a blow to the film industry. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, up next in our continuing digital safari series, we take a look at an heroic attempt by wildebeest to cross the Mara River in Kenya.
Yesterday on CGTN's Digital Safari. In the Masai Mara, the morning mist lingered over the vast landscape and meandering river. A small group of wildebeest, undeterred by the gloomy weather, attempted another crossing. Unfortunately, 2 of the herd members were unsuccessful, adding to the many who have lost their lives to the turbulent waters of this migration period. This predator once again reigned on the grassy plains of the Mara. The marsh pride feasted on an ultimate kill, a buffalo. The desire to be on top was evident even in the young. The Thompson's gazelle practiced their ducking and diving skills. And a trio of male giraffes have a territorial battle using their necks. In southern Africa, the grey skies continue to hover over the land. In Chitwa Chitwa, the musical sounds of the sterling brought a sense of calm, even if just for a moment. There was a cute sighting of a baby giraffe with its fluffy ossicones popping through the trees of Pride Lands. In contrast, at Juma, the site of Chidulu the leopardess was one of dominance. This show of female strength continued on in Pinda, with the female white rhinos showing off their power poise. Join us every day at 4:30 a.m. GMT on CGTN digital platforms for your very own virtual safari through the African wild.
After the break is sports news. Here's what's coming up. Dar Leopards thumped Arusha Rhinos 45-5 in a one-off rugby tournament in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We begin our sports coverage in Tanzania, where Dar Leopards thumped big rivals Arusha Rhinos 45-5 in a one-off rugby tournament in the country's commercial capital, Dar es Salaam. Rugby in Tanzania is a minor but growing sport, and organizers say the event was more about helping to grow support for the game in the country.
It's only a shame that there is only 1 or 2 other clubs in Tanzania. There's a team in Tanga, there's a team in Arusha, but that's about it. So a lot of the time we're forced to go up to Kenya to play matches. So we're trying to again, encourage development here so we can get more people involved.
A lot of players couldn't come, so we had a bit of a mishmash team, not necessarily our experienced players. But what was great is we had a lot of youth players. We had a lot of guys from our development rugby program who had a chance to really step up today and play against senior rugby for the first time. A lot of them have come from under 18s, and so now they're up against the big players.
Over in England, the traditional football season curtain raiser saw FA Cup